Hey there, thank you so much for being a part of this very special simulcast of our Big Time Talker podcast and Zoom into Books. Our special guest today is longtime Platters lead singer Joe Coleman, also a member of Voices of Classic Soul, as we celebrate Black History Month. The program is a service of our friends at speakermatch.com, the world's largest online virtual speakers bureau. What that means is if you're a meeting planner and you're going to start having platform speakers come back out and address your groups in person in 2022, meeting planners and speakers can find one another at that virtual marketplace at speakermatch.com. So check it out. The show is streamed everywhere: Spotify, Apple iTunes, iHeartMedia, Facebook Live. The video will be available on YouTube. And if you have a question you're watching live and you'd like to pose it to our guest, Joe Coleman, by all means do so, and we will pepper him with questions as we get into the show. The book that Joe is a part of is My Time to Shine, and it's a history of his friendship with a couple of other young men who also went on to be in legendary music groups. He also was a contributor to Voices from the Pandemic, which was a multi-award-winning book from our friends at Headline Books. My buddy, Joe Coleman, joins me to talk about Black History Month. Hello, sir.
Yeah, hey, Burke, how you doing, man?
I am blessed beyond compare and so happy that you are here to talk about the book and Black History Month and the contributions of Black folks to music in America. And really, when you look back at your era of music, the Platters and the Drifters and all of those great groups from the 50s and the 60s and 70s, sort of the launch of rock and roll, and even before that, blues and jazz.
Yeah.
Black music really is America's music, right?
Without question. Yeah. It's steeped in the history of America, and have you can follow the trail of experiences in your life through the path of Black American music. That was the music to dance to get married to, to have babies to to do the whole 9 yards at the senior prom, that first dance, all of that.
Well, as part of Black History Month, I really wanted to talk to you because you do a lot of work in your non-musical career in diversity and inclusion as well. And for folks who are watching that may not really understand what that is or what it all means, can you lay that out for us, what diversity and inclusion training is all about?
Well, basically, we look at minorities in business, primarily for us in corporate America and beyond. But we look at how they are being utilized in the workforce, whether they're being set up to progress in the company through promotions and mentors and mentorship and all that sort of thing. And we just try to make sure that they're fully integrated into the work life of a company, such that they can grow with the company, they can utilize their talents fully and be rewarded for it. And that's kind of thing. We just want to make sure that everybody gets a piece of the pie and that they're not set off on the side as the worker bees without reward.
And that whole subject matter continues to be around even today. I know as we do the show live during Black History Month, just a couple of weeks ago, there was some blowback from certain circles when President Biden said, hey, I'm going to name this new Supreme Court justice. I'm going to look at my short list, but one thing that's going to happen is it's going to be a Black female. And he got blowback from that. And, from folks saying, well, what if the most qualified person is not a Black female? And I would be curious, as a guy that works in that world a lot, how you would answer that piece of criticism to the president.
Well, I think it's the height of hypocrisy to say that when the opportunity for him to pronounce that he's going to finally bring a Black woman into the mix, that those who understood throughout our history that the Supreme Court justices were going to be white men.
Right.
They didn't have to say it. It was understood and everybody knew what the deal was. They were not going to look at anybody but a white man primarily. For them to come forth now and when the opportunity presents itself and act as though this is not a box, a position that needs to be filled by a woman, to bring her into, to make the court look more like America, to look more like America. It's his duty. It's his duty as part of bringing folks together to include women in the process, in the highest court in the land.
And it wasn't that long ago when we got our first female Supreme Court justice, period.
Period. That's right. That's right.
Hey, I want to rewind, and I'm very careful in how I say this because I don't want to set you up as, an old guy. I want to set you up as an experienced guy, but I'm going to make you go way back in your memory to when you were a little kid. Yeah. Growing up in Washington, D.C. And by the way, if you're just joining us, my special guest is my dear friend, Joe Coleman, former lead singer for over 2 decades with the Platters, and now part of Voices of Classic Soul. When you grew up in the 1960s in Washington, D.C., it was a very different kind of world for you and a lot of other African-American folks. You've told me before, D.C. was known as Chocolate City. So paint that picture of what Joe Coleman's childhood was like. I want you to go back in your mind and tell me about growing up in this city in the 1960s.
Wow, that's a great question, Bert. That's, yeah. I mean, it's a great experience, right? I'm growing up in Washington, D.C. The postman is Black. The dentist is Black. The store owner is Black. The guy that owns the restaurant is Black. And yes, Chocolate City, we were 80% Black city. And I never felt a great deal of that discrimination that was occurring in other places, to the extent that when I did travel south to a little town called Clover, Virginia, where I was born in my grandfather's house. And our family was an entrepreneurial family. My aunt owned the country store in her area. My grandfather owned the country store in his area. So I grew up with that kind of sense of being about something, even as a little kid. So I'm down there. I go to the movie with my cousins down in South Boston, Virginia.
And how old are you when this happens? You're down there visiting.
I'm about 7 or 8, about 8 years old, 8 or 9 years old.
Early 60s, mid 60s, somewhere in there?
Yeah.
Okay. All
right. And I being from DC, I walked straight into the theater, walked straight into the main theater. Everybody in the place goes crazy, including my little cousins, because they live down there. What the heck are you doing? I had no idea that I had to go up to the balcony where the colored folks sat. So that was not my experience. I grew up in DC. We ran everything, so to speak.
Right.
And so yes, it was quite a different experience from what would most people experienced at that time.
Yeah, that must have been very eye-opening. Yes. To be outside the city and little kid. Was that the first time that the division of races was a conscious memory for you?
I believe it was, to that extent. I think to be perfectly honest, we used to travel back south on the Greyhound bus with my mom. She would pack the little lunch in the basket lunch there with for us to eat. And of course I didn't really fully understand why she did that when I knew that we were going to be stopping at a place in Petersburg, Virginia, for the rest over there, and folks would get food there. But it was a great experience that I had that was kind of just almost became kind of normal in that sense. When we got to Petersburg, there was the bus depot was split right down the middle. So it seemed to me. One side was not painted, was dingy, beat up, and the other side was perfectly painted, a nice building, blah, blah, blah. The black people colored people, pardon me, had to go around to the back to a window. It was was obviously the back of the kitchen, and
Right.
and the white folks, pardon the expression, went right into the thing, got their lunch. The black people had to wait and hope that there was enough time for them to get served, because they weren't going to get served until all of the white folks had been served. So I experienced that several times going back and forth to Richmond, and of course that's why Mom packed that lunch for us, because we were probably not going to be served in Petersburg at the stopover and that kind of thing. So that was something that I was very aware of, and we questioning Mom as to why we got to wait, why we can't we get it, and she's trying to shush us, and
You're kids, you don't know.
We don't know, but yeah. So that's the additional experience. But beyond that, yeah, I was mostly. I wouldn't call it shielded, but I just grew up in a different environment.
Do you think, Joe, that growing up in a city like Washington, where there were lots of positive male and female role models that had the same skin color as yours, affected your outlook on life? Because you could see success there, and that seems to be a real issue even today for lots of minorities in America, where there are no or not enough successful role models in a variety of things. Yes, you may see an NBA basketball player or an NFL player, but that's it. Nobody in your town. So in your town, though, it was the banker, the butcher, the barber, everybody had the same skin color. Do you think that changed your outlook on what might be possible?
It made me, I was limitless, right? I mean, there were no limits on what I could do, because I mean, there it was right in front of me. This person is doing this, the lawyer, and everybody. So yes, it broadened my view of the world and what possibilities were for me. I mean, let's be clear. There was a limit, even though most of the folks in my school were Black. There was a limit to what we were exposed to, in the sense that I think about the counselors who would talk to us about what we wanted to do in college and what blah, 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 blah. And they talked about maybe going to social work, social studies, but we didn't talk about marine biology. We didn't talk about any of those, physicists or any of that kind of thing. Those weren't the conversations that we had. So from that side, we weren't fed the height of what the possibilities could be, but visually and by experience, I could see it all around me. So if that answers your question, yeah, I could see what was possible, and it seemed to be a lot, but there were certain things we never even were exposed to. Yeah, at the same time.
Joe Coleman is our guest today, former lead singer of the Platters, now a member of Voices of Classic Soul. Check him out online at voicesofclassicsoul.com, where he performs alongside former lead singers of the Temptations, the Drifters, the Four Tops. Joe also is a Mom's Choice Award winner, the Paris Book Festival, and on for this book right here that I was honored to be a part of helping put together, My Time to Shine. If you see those guys there, those are Joe's childhood friends, Glenn Leonard, Joe Blunt, and that's Joe Coleman in the middle. And those guys that you grew up alongside, it's an amazing story where all three of you became members of three of the most legendary groups of all time: the Temptations, the Drifters, the Four Tops. The Drifters, the Temptations, and the Platters for you. But how is that even possible, that these three kids that grew up together had that sort of success overall? That's just an amazing thing.
Yes. Unbelievable. I can't believe it myself. I mean, who'd ever thunk it? Yes, these guys I grew up with, Joe Blunt and I, church mates, and like I said, in the junior choir with his mom, my mom, directors of Reverend Effie Coleman and Reverend Nan Blunt, now Nan Brown, taught us everything we knew about the business, about music, about singing, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just an unbelievable story. And
how old were you when you met Joe Blunt?
About 7 or 8 years old. We were about 7 or 8. as my favorite story. I'll tell it one more time because I love to tell it because it's just, it's kind of my mom. It's kind of the mom I had, right? She called me Joey. I'm coming home from school. Like I said, I'm 7 or 8 years old. And she says to me, hey, Joey, it's time to get ready for choir rehearsal. And I say, Mom, I'm not in, I'm not in the choir. She said, oh, I didn't tell you. You are in the choir. And so that, you know, that started that journey. Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, 2nd and Rhode Island Avenue, Northwest Washington, D.C. And, you know, the pastor of the church now, Reverend Streeter, was a young, even younger kid. My mom, he was in my mother and my father's Sunday school classes, that kind of thing. So that's where we met. Glenn came along about age 15. He came into the picture, and we started, you know, doing talent shows and all those kind of things around Washington, and kind of figuring out whether this was something we really wanted to do. You know.
And you guys formed a group right out of high school called The True Reflection, and you got a record deal, and you toured all over back in the early 70s. Can you remember, I'm sure you can, share with us some of the artists that you toured with back in the 1970s?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, The True Reflection was the name of the group. We were on Atlantic Records, the ADCO label of Atlantic Records, and we worked with the Isley Brothers and Harold Melvin, Blue Notes, the Dramatics, Smokey Robinson, the Miracles, everybody, the Spinners, Al Green, just all sorts of amazing artists. And we got to stand in the wings and watch them do their thing and kind of figure out what we needed to add to our little things in order to be with them. But yeah, just some great artists that we were blessed to work with at that time. You know, New Birth, man, just so many great artists, and that's where we first got to know and work with Teddy Pendergrass, because he was the lead singer with Harold Melvin's Blue Notes at the time, and
it must have been an incredible musical education for, you know, you young guys being out there on the road and watching from the wings all these legendary artists do their thing.
That's right. It was absolutely amazing.
Soak it up.
Yep, you're soaking it up and getting our butts kicked sometime, and sometimes realizing that we can hang. What was the biggest lesson for us, and the greatest lesson, was that we realized that we can hang. You know, at the end of the show, that we weren't getting booed off the stage or run out of the building. But one of my favorite stories, and Joe Blunt and I talk about it from time to time, is we were doing this big show at the Cobo Hall in Detroit. About 10,000 people in there, and everybody that you can think of in the business was on the show. It was an absolutely amazing show. And we were standing in the wings. We're next. The Persuaders had the song Thin Line Between Love and Hate was on that show as well. And I mentioned that because my brother was in that group at the time. And so we were back there. Yep. And so they sold me copies. It's a thin line. And anyway, so we're standing in the wings. We're next. The promoter comes and taps on the shoulder. Sorry, fellas, we're going to have to hold you out for a minute. Al Green's got a show tonight in Memphis. And we, because it was an afternoon show.
Right,
and
right.
Christmas. And so Al Green went on next. Hot as fire.
And this is like right at when he was the biggest thing in the world, right?
The biggest thing in the world.
Early 70s.
Yeah, and he was, you know, so he went on and killed them. He literally just slayed them, and then we had to come on. So, ladies and gentlemen, True Reflection. I'm all you hear this what? There's 10,000 people in there. Oh, that's nice. So it took us a couple of songs to get them back. You know, we 2 songs. By the third song, we kind of were back in the mix. And I remember our A&R guy called me up and he said, "Hey man, I heard you guys had to go up against Al." You know, and I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, let me just tell you, the word was that you guys held your own in that circumstance. So we knew we were going the right direction.
There was no incoming fruits and vegetables,
But
so
no,
you made it out.
That's right.
Made it out unscathed. Wow.
Yes.
Well, so I have to ask you, and I know that you served in the Air Force during that time. This was a time of incredible turmoil in America. Yeah. There was, the civil rights, unrest was off the chain. You had, the assassination of Dr. King and of JFK and Bobby Kennedy and of course Vietnam in that stew, and you're living right in the middle of it in Washington, D.C. What was that like for folks that were not around back then?
Hey, well, you hit me again with that one.
So how difficult was it at that time? And maybe it's more of you sort of fleshing it out of what it was like to live right in the middle of all of that civil rights turmoil and all the, the assassination of Martin Luther King, Dr. King, and the Kennedy brothers, and Vietnam all happening at once while you're trying to get your feet up from up and under you. I mean, you're coming of age right in the middle of all that. Yeah. Were you consciously aware as a young guy that the world was kind of spinning out of control then?
I would say I was. I've always kind of tried to be in the moment. So yes, it was an interesting time. I was, as you said, I was in the Air Force for a good portion of that period, and so it was interesting. I was in Japan for a period of that time, and I was getting reports, newspapers. I was able to view some of it from afar, and which gave me a different perspective. I was able to kind of like stand back and almost view it. But beyond that, the DC experience was that I was kind of in it, but not in it. The life kind of continued. There was a period when there was burnings and looting and that kind of thing going on around the city, and so you had to kind of like navigate yourself. But at the same time, life was going on. We were still going to school. We were still doing what we do, and it was just an interesting time. It was a duality thing going on. I was living two lives and experiencing that. Reverend Walter Fauntleroy was a friend of the family. Was often at our home and talking, and sitting in our living room talking about that kind of thing, and kind of keeping us up to speed on what was going on. So it was quite interesting in that regard.
If you're just joining us today, our guest is Joe Coleman. He's an award-winning author. The book is My Time to Shine. It's a story about his lifelong friendship with a couple of other gentlemen who also grew up to be in some of the most famous music groups of all time, the Drifters, the Temptations, and also Joe spent over 2 decades with the Platters. If you have a question or a comment for Mr. Coleman, as part of our Black History Month broadcast, by all means, send it in to us now if you happen to be watching or listening live and online. He's now a member of the Voices of Classic Soul. When you graduated in high school in 1960, what, Joe?
I graduated in 1965.
1965. So literally right in the middle of all that happening. And you mentioned sort of navigating through the streets of DC through lootings and riots and burnings and all that.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you some tough questions here, because we're going to get into this a little bit. There may be folks, again, who are watching or going, okay, if African Americans want to advance their thing, why burn those businesses? Why destroy what's around them? Because you said you had lawyers and doctors and bankers and shop owners that were right there. So why do that? Why does that happen?
That's a question that I've struggled with over the years. And the best answer I can give you is ownership. Yes, there were the lawyers and there was this and there was that. And we've always had 2 classes at least. There's the three, but there's that other class that doesn't feel like they're part of anything, that they're being trod upon, that they're being misused, abused, that kind of thing. So there's no ownership in any of this, and so it's not mine. And I don't relate to it. It's all of it's against me. You're all against me, and it's just that anger and frustration of having a say in anything that causes you to sometimes just want to burn it all down or throw it all away because it's not yours anyway. As they would often say, man, the man ain't gonna let me have nothing no how. He ain't gonna let me have nothing. Yeah.
I got it. So you don't necessarily buy into that, but you understand the frustration.
But I understand. Yeah, it's a frustration that we haven't addressed fully yet, because that class of people who aren't sharing in the dream, aren't sharing in the dream, are left to their own devices, or at least that's the way they feel. They probably are, but I mean, they certainly feel that way, and it's a frustration that hasn't been dealt with yet.
You talked about your group, The True Reflection, and in the early 70s, touring with all those massive artists. And that could have been it, right? That would be more than enough for most people who get into the music business to be able to just be on tour and be around and open for and get to know all those legendary artists. But then there's this amazing second act that comes for all three of you guys. Yeah. And you all join these legendary groups. So first, Glenn Leonard, who, if you haven't read My Time to Shine, you got to pick it up from Headline Books. And I think there's a way, if you go to headlinebooks.com, that Joe Coleman can actually sign this for you. Glenn, who it says in the book, he grew up always wanting to be a Temptation. Like that was his lifetime dream. He gets to do it. Yeah. And then Mr. Blunt, Joe Blunt, spends 10 years in the Drifters or more, singing with Benny King and Johnny Moore. And then you're the last one in, but you spend over 2 decades with the Platters, doing all those legendary love songs. Yeah. What an incredible second act and turn of events. So when you guys are on tour together, when artists are together, you're all in the same room, you're on the same bus, you're on the same airplane. But the three of you who had toured all over the world together as The True Reflection, a decade later, find yourself in these other groups that are touring the world separately, and literally 3 of the biggest groups in rock and roll music history. They're all members now of the Hall of Fame. And I wondered if you stayed in touch during that time, if you ever ran into each other at airports, if you kept tabs with one another, because it was a different time. You didn't have the internet and social media to keep track of one another. So did you drift apart, or were you in touch? What happened when Glenn was in the Temps, you were in the Platters, and Joe Blunt was in the Drifters?
Well, again, Glenn was the first one to make that leap, right? So I was blessed to be the one who conveyed the message that the Temps were looking for him. Glenn was up in Toronto, Canada, and hanging out, because that was one of our stomping grounds as part of the True Reflection thing. Right. Speaking with Tony Sylvester from Main Ingredient, because we had been working on a project together, and he said, I played some music, some of the music, and Melvin asked, who was that guy? Who was that tenor? And, Melvin
Franklin from the Temptations.
Melvin Franklin from the Temps. Yes, who was that tenor, right? And he's talking to, Tony's talking to me, and I said, yeah. He said, so they'd love to check him out, man. So let them know they're looking for him. And so I called Joe Blunt, called Joe, and I said, hey, man, I related the story. And he was able to track Glenn down in Toronto. And the rest is history. They sent him a ticket, airline. He told him to make it one way because he wasn't planning on coming back. And
it's interesting just the way you talked about that story, because today it would be a cell phone and a text and instantaneous communication, but it took a minute, like a daisy chain, to even get to Glenn to tell him the Temptations were interested in him.
Yeah, interested in him. Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but that is so true. We had to go the traditional route and track this guy down. right? So as a result of that, I was present for his very first performance in DC. They came to Washington, and we hung out at the hotel and went over to I think it was the Carter Barron in Washington D.C. outdoor.
Oh, that amphitheater, beautiful amphitheater, yes.
Beautiful out there, and that was his first show with the Temps in the area, and you know, all his family was there, and I was there, and I was glowing. It was amazing to see a dream come true. Since he was 15, he said, "I am going to sing with the Temptations," and there he was on stage and killing it, he's hanging, you know. Again, you may have noticed I bring it up every now and then. The idea is that not just to be there, but to be able to actually do it. And
to excel. Yeah,
excel and be right, you know, fit in and be part of it on that level. So that was amazing. That was an amazing moment. You know, and so that's him. And Joe, I looked out in the audience, and we were at the Hilton in Atlantic City, and he and his wife were sitting out there. I said, "Oh," so that.
When you were on stage singing with the Platters, you saw them in the audience.
I saw them with the audience, you know, and you know, when we kept in touch from time to time. But that was to see him out there when I'm doing my show. I didn't get to see his show because he was mostly, as you know, he was mostly in Europe.
Right.
They performed mostly over there. So
yeah, the Drifters had this amazing second career, which you can read about in My Time to Shine, where, you know, they were most popular in the States in the 60s, but in the 1970s had a whole bunch more top 10 and #1 hits in Europe, and you know, they were right up there with Elton John and Queen and all those acts.
That's right. It's all over again. That's right.
What an amazing story. My Time to Shine, about these three lifetime friends who got a chance to be in three of the biggest music groups of all time, and then get together late in life and do a nice reunion tour. It's available at headlinebooks.com, and you can get an autographed copy. It is Black History Month, so we're talking about African Americans and their place in the history of this great country. And we're taking your questions, and I do have a question that's come in from Patricia Roberts. Patricia, thank you so much for listening and for watching today. And I think I know what the jumping off point is on her question, and it has to do with the horrible phenomena of young African American suicides. And she asked whether or not you think that the modern day music is a contributing factor in the increase in suicides in the Black community, and you know, if not, how is music today benefiting that community? And that was a big topic, I have to tell you, Joe, in the white community during the Super Bowl. It was amazing to see, you know, this Super Bowl. And if you scroll through social media, there were two very distinct groups of people. There were the people that said, "That's amazing. That was the best Super Bowl halftime performance since Prince." And then a whole lot of people that pushed real hard against it. And there did seem to be very little in the middle there. And I will tell you, before you answer Patricia's question, the one big takeaway that I had was, you know, those albums from, you know, Dr. Dre's The Chronic came out in 1992. This was not a new thing, a new phenomenon, new music. And to put that in perspective for people that are joining us today, that would be as if in 1992, they had people like Etta James and Sam Cooke doing the Super Bowl. So think about that, 30 years before. Right?
True.
Because that album has been out for 30 years now. It's not a new thing. Yeah. So to answer Patricia's question, does the tone of hip hop music today, do you think that relates to this horrible instance of suicides in your community?
I get the tone. I understand the question, the reason for the question. I think it's more social media. I think it's more social media. The lyrics and the music of today are a little bit more raw,
right,
in your face, and talking directly about things that my generation and songwriters, as a songwriter, we've kind of finessed a lot of our conversations, you know, and put it in more flowery language. And again, now it's very raw. But right now, I think social media is can be so vicious and violent.
Divisive.
Yes.
Very divisive.
And it creates a circumstance where people are being shamed and abused online by strangers. Now there's another piece of that, but I don't want to get too deep into this because I don't want to blow back here.
That's all right.
Yeah,
that's all right. Speak your truth.
Yeah, but young people are being raised differently. They're a little less hardcore, to put it softly. In an effort to try to give their children, to give people everything that they should have, sometimes they don't allow them to experience hurt and disappointment and loss and failure and my mom's thing was always, and I remember even as a little, for some reason, it was one thing, first thing I remember about my mom was I was almost a baby, and I would fall down, and she said, "Oh, get up again, oh, fall down, get." She didn't run and grab me, and oh my God, you fell. She would, it was more like, "Oh, get up," and I hear that ringing when something happens that causes me to have to regroup, and I hear her voice. All right, get up, you fell down, get up and try again. And there needs to be more of that, more to let them skin that knee, and all that. And, but the music is different now. It's raw. Some of it's not as artistic when you talk about pure artistry, but it is speaking to what's going on today. So, spend more time making sure your kid is not being eaten up by social media, and I think you'll bring down the suicide thing, because right now they're feeling isolated on social media.
Good answer. Joe Coleman, former lead singer of the Platters, now one of the members of Voices of Classic Soul. Check him out at voicesofclassicsoul.com. He's also an award-winning author, a contributor to Voices from the Pandemic and My Time to Shine. Hey, let's talk about the pandemic. And that book you contributed to was what was happening in people's lives and people's minds during that time. I know I was with you for a full week of shows in Florida, and then we flew back, and you didn't go on stage again for over a year. What does that do to someone who has spent his entire life with footlights in front of him and an audience out there to not be able to do that for that long a time? What does that do up here?
Yeah, that's pretty painful. That was pretty painful. It was really a tough period for me. A person who, for 50 years, has been able to go out there and do what I do. And then all of a sudden it was so drastic and such quick. And when you bring up the Tampa thing, because coming out of that, we felt so energized and felt like we were on the path, on the road to something really great. Voices of Classic Soul was pretty much in its infant stages, and we were just starting to figure it out.
Poised for great things, yeah.
Yeah, and that week of shows let us know that we were on to something really, really, really good. Theo Peoples is the new addition to the group, was a phenomenal, great guy, and it was great to work with him. So we felt really strong. So it was like falling off a cliff. And as you know, it started off with postponements. They start off as postponements. Well, the West Virginia thing,
we'll see in 6 weeks. We'll see in 2 months.
We'll see in 2 months. I'm sure it'll be over, blah, blah, blah. Let's just put it on hold right now, and we keep moving. And of course, as we know, it never did. So it brought about some anxiety, things that I've never experienced, really. I had periods of anxiety and that kind of thing like that. And I advise anyone who is having anything like that to seek some help. I'll just say that. I think there's nothing wrong with having someone tell you you're all right. You're all right, man. You're doing good. So But yes, it was a tough time. It was really tough. Yeah.
Joe Coleman, our guest today, former lead singer of the Platters and a member of Voices of Classic Soul. And for folks who haven't seen Voices of Classic Soul, we've got a question here that kind of lends itself to that. I don't have a name for the question, but the question is, how does it feel for you? How does it feel when you're singing those great songs that go way back and people in the audience sing every word along with you? Because that's what Voices of Classic Soul is. I mean, it is all those songs that people grew up with and are a fabric of their lives, from the Temptations, Four Tops, the Platters, and the Drifters. Now, those Platter songs especially, you've sung those songs thousands of times. How do you feel and how do you stay in the moment when you sing those songs and realize just how important they are to people? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it is just, you know, I'm always overwhelmed with kind of gratitude, really, that people relate to those songs and the way they do. They're, first of all, as you say, they're just amazing songs, and to be able to represent and sing those songs in front of these enthusiastic audiences, as you say, that know all the words, kind of
sing along, dance to them.
Along, yeah, puts a little pressure on them, brother. Can't miss no word.
That's right.
You know, but it's just amazing. Each audience is new, and so it's always, that's where the freshness comes. I tell people, you know, artists are better artists when they have great audiences.
Right.
And a great audiences makes for a better artist, because you get all that energy and it just fuels the whole performance. And certainly songs that you've sung 10,000 times, that helps bring a freshness to it. You know, I always try to be organic to a degree with the songs, and maybe just add a little touch, a little flavor here. You might not even hear it, but something that keeps it fresh for me.
You were a member of sort of the second generation, as was Joe Blunt and Glenn Leonard from My Time to Shine, and Theo Peoples as well. The second generation of all these famous groups that have gone on, and you know, because otherwise, you know, the Platters had their hits in the mid-50s. You'd be like 110 years old at that point. But I wonder if when you talk to the original members that were still around of those groups, if you ever talked to them about the racial blowback, Joe, that they may have received, you know, touring in the 1950s and the 60s, you know, particularly down south, the Chitlin circuit, but certainly in other places as well. Because that's, I don't want to say it's a uniquely American thing, but I do know lots of musicians that tour in Europe, and they can't wrap their heads around how that could ever even be a thing here.
Yeah.
So did you ever talk to any of the original members of the Platters, the Drifters, the Temptations, Four Tops, those other groups, about what those days were like, and were there any lessons that you took away from it?
Yeah, you know, as you probably know, I became friends with Benny King, first of all, who was a great
member of the Drifters,
the Drifters, and great career on his own, and people like that. And I did get to speak with Herb on one occasion, Herb Reed, from the bass singer from the
Platters,
Platters, and that kind of thing. And you know, it's almost even folklore for them. It's almost like relating a story that was from a time gone by, thankfully, that they almost, it's almost, though it was painful, they view it as just an experience that helped mold them into who they are, you know, who they became, and the toughness that's required to be in this business. You know, yeah, you couldn't stay in certain hotels, in certain places. You couldn't eat if you were working in a particular hotel, you couldn't eat in their restaurant. They wanted you to come to the stage through the kitchen. You know, your bus getting stopped on the road by state troopers that just wanted to harass you to come out and have you march off the bus and sing for them to prove that you were actual singers, you know, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, you know, those experiences I'm well aware of, and I've, you know, spoken to numerous artists of all types. I had the great pleasure of actually, I think I just told you that recently, that I hung out with Miles Davis a few times.
Yeah, yeah.
And hung at his apartment, and you know, his experience was different but the same, you know, and talking about things like that. And
you know, you say that Joe, you know, it's like a distant memory. It was 10 years before you were in the business. This is none of this is a long time ago.
That's true. That is
in
so
the overall scheme of things, you know, and it may seem like for folks, you know, my son's age that it's ancient history, but it's not that ancient. You know, we all, you know, I'm sure everybody that's on this listening right now or watching right now remembers George Wallace. It's not that long ago.
Mhm.
Let me flip that question to you. When you became a success, when you joined the Platters, when you were out there with Voices of Classic Soul, do you ever get a sense that folks treat you differently because you are a celebrity, you are an entertainer, than they would if they were to encounter you on the street?
Without question. There's no doubt about that. You know,
how does that make you feel, and how do you deal with that?
Well, you know, it's very upsetting to think that, you know, I'm accepted more because I present well, right? Because
you present well. What does that mean? Because the way you speak, the way you dress?
Yes, all of that. You know, even before the Platters, you know, when I thought I could do a corporate kind of thing, which I ultimately could not. There were those that spoke to me about and talked about how I was different from the other Black people that they had encountered, you know, and because I could speak well and I wore a nice suit, and I, you know, had some experiences and that sort of thing.
Right.
So they separated me from the rest of the Black people in the sense, in their minds, that I was somehow a little bit more acceptable. And certainly it elevated and just went through the roof when I became a member of the Platters, and you could see those who would otherwise not bother with me at all, you know, clamor to have a conversation with me. But I'm, you know, one thing about the music business, you begin to read people very quickly, and you kind of have a sense of who you're talking to.
Because you meet so many people so quickly. Yeah.
And they're always, you know, people, we come and hang this, come and do this. And so you have to read the side very quickly if that's someone that you feel like you can let your guard down and do that with, or you've been walking into something you don't want to be involved in. And so, yeah, so that sixth sense is developed to a very high level. And so, yeah, often when I meet people, I'm reading them very quickly, and some of them I know, you know what, if I wasn't with the Platters, this guy would probably not even let me walk in this door.
They cross the street to avoid you. Wow.
Cross the street, yeah.
Really things that us white folks don't normally think about, and certainly never even have to consider. Mm-hmm. It's Black History Month. Joe Coleman, my friend, longtime lead singer of the Platters, is our guest today. He also is a member of Voices of Classic Soul and the co-author of My Time to Shine, along with Michael Willard, a story about three young men who grew up in the streets of Washington, D.C., went on to be members of three of the biggest music groups of all time, available from Headline Books. Hey, you've spent some time, Joe, you spent many years living in New York City, working in and around Broadway shows like The Wiz that put a different spin on that classic story and make it accessible to African-American audiences. You also were very, very involved in putting together a touring play that kind of knocked down the door of Broadway about a civil rights icon, Dr. Dorothy Height, that maybe folks aren't that aware of. And I wonder if you could just spend a couple of minutes telling me about Dr. Height, what made her special, and about that play that you wrote about her.
Yeah, besides my wife, one of the most amazing women I have ever encountered. Dr. Dorothy Height was just an awesome woman. When she passed, she was 98, but she had been involved in most every civil rights situation since she was probably, her first encounter was she was 12 years old. She walked into a YWCA that had a colored swim day, which was Thursday. And I'm telling the story backwards. She walked into the YWCA. They did not have a colored swim day. Colored people could not swim in the pool. At all. And she walked in and asked the director, why? Why couldn't black kids swim in the pool? And of course, they did not have a good answer. And so she organized a protest march. She was 12 out in front of that until they relented. Relented and gave them Thursdays that they could the colored kids could come and swim in it. Well, colored people could come and swim in the pool.
Wow.
And this was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
So not even in the deep South. Wow.
Not even in
the South at all.
Not South at all. Yep. But anyway, she mentored Martin Luther King Jr. She met him when he was 15. He was going to Morehouse at 15, college. And she was the only female member of the Civil Rights Six, Martin Luther King, Roy Wilkins, and all those guys, James Farmer and all those people. And so we put together this musical about her life because she was just amazing. And it's about the women of the Civil Rights Movement. And so I wrote about 26 songs for that. And I, used my experience with songs like Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn You Around, and How I Got Over, and We Shall Overcome, to create some songs about the movement. I wrote a song called Open Wide, the gates, open wide the gates of freedom, let my people in. Open wide the gates of freedom, let my people in. I'm tired of standing by the wayside, waiting for a change to come. Open wide the freedom gates, we're coming in. Yeah, like that. So
I love it. We get a little free show there.
A free show, yeah. So we wanted to talk about Dr. Height, and she was the first example, one of the first examples of set-asides. She was granted a scholarship to Vassar College, Barnard College. Barnard.
Okay.
But that was because her last name was spelled H-E-I-G-H-T, Dorothy Height, H-E-I-G-H-T. That has nothing, does not have the ring of a Black person. So right. She was accepted. When she showed up for the first day of class to register, they said, "Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. We've already got our quota of 2 Negroes, but if you wait until next year, I'm sure you can get in."
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And so she went to NYU, graduated 3 years with a master's. I don't know how you do that.
Wow.
I don't know how you do it.
I'm feeling pretty inadequate at that.
Yeah,
So if people want to look up for Black History Month, Dr. Dorothy Height, I'm sure there's all kinds of information online about her.
Yeah, she was the head of the National Council of Negro Women. So yeah, you can go on their website, ncnw.org, and check her out. But she was absolutely amazing. She was the 3-time president of the Deltas, Delta Sigma Theta, the huge women's sorority. And yeah, she's just amazing, everything woman.
And the name of the musical, if folks want to Google that too and see what might be out there?
Yeah, how about that? I should have mentioned, If This Hat Could Talk.
Because she was well known for the big, colorful,
beautiful hats. She was always dressed to the nines. We had as our lead characters Melba Moore and Stephanie Mills.
Wow.
Great Tony Terry, who's also a DC native.
Sure.
Who played Martin Luther King Jr. I played A. Philip Randolph. Like I said, I was the composer and and co-executive producer along with my wife. So yeah, it was.
Was that the first time that you became, and you're going to put it out here for everybody, that you really became immersed in Black history? And was that the thing that got you really interested and involved? Was Dr. Height? On that level, like I said, Reverend Walter Fauntleroy, who was one of Martin Luther King's, guys, was at my house talking about that stuff all the time. So, like and that was just part of your childhood experience, which is pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah, he was a friend with my father, as I said. So
that's crazy. That's just amazing. And you're spending time at Miles Davis' apartment in New York. You've had a pretty amazing life. Wow. James, all right.
One more. I got to talk about James Baldwin. All
right.
Yeah, he was his brother was the bartender at a place called McKell's, James, in New York, where I was living at the time, and so James Baldwin would come in all the time. We would sit there at the bar and talk, and he would have his cigarette and talk about all that stuff. So yeah, great experiences, man. Just
to be a fly on the wall. Wow,
with
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, so if there are folks who are watching right now who may say, Joe, why is Black History Month important? And maybe they would even say, why isn't there a White History Month? Why isn't there an Irish History Month? Why isn't there a Scottish History Month? There probably are those. They just don't have as good a marketing as Black History Month. But I digress. Why would you say that celebrating Black history is important overall in America?
Well, I'll start with the first answer is because no one knows anything about Black history. Why? Because it wasn't in the school books. You can go to why is there not a White History Month? Because when you're in class, you're reading about white history all the time. George White named them. They're all in the book. But I bet you the average white person cannot name 10, 6, 5 important Black people who, the guy who, the stoplight, open heart surgery, or heart surgery, all those kinds of things, they can't name those people because they were never in the book. I went to school thinking that George Washington Carver was one of 2 Black men that ever did anything. And Crispus Attucks was the first person killed in the Revolutionary War. It just happened to be Black. So they must have thrown him up in front of the line. He took the first one. But beyond that, there's no conversation. There was no, I'm sure there is now to some degree, but there was no conversation about Black people in American history books, in high school, junior high school, elementary school, or college for that matter. So
this was an impetus, you think, to rectify that. And do you believe that things are getting better now?
I think it's getting better. I don't. Yes, I think it's
because of that.
Because of that, because it's hard to respect the people if you don't feel like they've ever done anything. You feel like I think people think that Black people, other than being the slaves that built this country, which they now want to deny that, but we didn't do anything. So what did they deserve? They didn't contribute anything. White America is the one that invented everything and did everything and all of that, and because they don't know about us. So it is so very important that they learn about powerful Black men and women who did great things for America and did it on purpose, did it to better society on purpose. And people need to know about those people. Important for
Black children, important for white folks, important for everybody.
Yeah, again, it brings everybody, it gives everybody a better understanding of why we even talk about these things. What is it? What's your contribution to society? What makes you makes you feel that you deserve an equal piece of the pie. If they don't feel like you've done anything, there's no reason why you should share fully in the pie. And so that's the premise that they worked off all these years, because we were never in the book. That's just a fact. And I don't think I'm going to run into anybody of your age going back that's going to say that there were a lot of people in their book that were Black.
Right, right.
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about seeing you perform, Joe, with Voices of Classic Soul, it's hard to look at the stage and not look out at that audience and see that rainbow of different ages and ethnicities and men and women. Everybody loves that music. Yeah. And you really bring them together.
Yeah. Now listen, and that's where Motown comes in.
Right.
Motown until after the actual civil rights period, you can't really point to any songs that were, civil rights songs that they put out. But what they did was they broke the color barrier. They came into, through radio, came into white homes and developed audiences that were white, who grew to understand this music and to love it and dance to it, that kind of thing. And it just broadened the conversation about what Black and white, because now we're talking about Black artists that are amazing. My favorite actor, just imagine a little white kid saying that their favorite act is the Supremes.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it just broadened the conversation.
And then it transcends music and it becomes a bigger cultural phenomenon.
That's right. Then it becomes part of the culture at large, and not just about music, but about, talented Black people interacting with talented white people.
It's a beautiful thing, and you're a small part of it, but you are a part of Black music history and Black History Month, and I appreciate you spending time with me today.
Well, it was fantastic, and I enjoyed it so much. Yeah.
Right there. That's my friend, Joe Coleman, and this is his book. It's an award winner. Look at it. My Time to Shine. Those three guys grew up together in D.C. Glenn Leonard, Joe Coleman, and Joe Blunt went on to be in three of the biggest music groups of all time, the Temptations, the Platters, and the Drifters. And you can get an autographed copy from our friends at Headline Books. Thank you to our show sponsor, SpeakerMatch.com. Thanks to our special guest, Joe Coleman from Voices of Classic Soul, for being here today. I'm Burke Allen for Black History Month. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Now go out there and make it a great day. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.